That was a
sure.
good episode.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was
Yeah.
dope. It's easy.
Yeah. What'd
Nice.
you think of what'd you think of my conclusion? Hopefully I wasn't too far off.
No, I think that summed it up,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Um,
what it is. I mean, as much as people want to say like, oh yeah, da, 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 there's differences. I'm like, I mean, honestly, yeah, sure, there's differences, but I'm pretty sure at the end of the day, like, we're all going the same thing here.
yeah. The only difference is just a different advancement, different technology available to us.
Yeah.
What is up? Thank you for tuning in again to Real Talk by Our Stories, Your Legacy. And we are back with another Fire Round episode. And just a reminder, another Fire Round episode is pretty much us as a team talk about whatever's hot, any trending topic, or just whatever question that just happened to inspire us in the moment. But today's Fire Round episode, is a continuation, a part 2 of last week's episode when a listener provided us with a question, and we went off about it last week episode, and we kind of ran out of time for a few things, and so we're going to touch up on that again on part 2. And so just a quick little recap of last week. It was kind of about us growing up in a millennial generation, with especially being in an Asian household, there were many strict rules, including expectations bestowed upon us from our parents, and we're expected to find success and all that stuff. But ultimately, there was like a greater disconnect of intentions between what it appeared to be like, kind of like a lack of trust from them, and you can listen more from our previous podcast. But ultimately, the question from our listener was, how do we deal with the realities of us growing up and versus or conflicting against the expectations that our parents had? Because our parents grew up in a different time, they went through their own different struggles, and so ultimately what they learned, they were hoping to bestow upon us. But obviously we grew up in a different time, like the technology age, things were different. So here's we talked about our realities versus how they wanted us to grow up, and so in today's episode, we are continuing that, and the discussion today is, again, generational differences between us and our parents or grandparents' generation, or just previous generation in general, and talking about our work and our living situation compared to the mindset they had. And so that's kind of overall the question. We're going to hash out that question a little more smoother once we get in. But as always, from our episode, we are going to do a quick check-in to see who is here today. And I'm going to start with you, Tyler. Actually, only Tyler. It's Tyler and I again. And so, Tyler, how's it going today?
It's going well, man. Going well. Had the day off, so kind of, got things done, I guess you could say, running network and setting up a new office and all that stuff, and going on a long run and / walk at Chambers Bay. So, I mean, it's a perfect day for it. It's kind of nice. Just kind of not to work also.
Right.
Funny how that works when you take time off of work and you end up doing chores or running errands or doing stuff that, you have to do anyways. So it's like, oh, now there's just more time for me to do work at our place or whatever it might be, so it's relaxing, but not relaxing at the same time. It's just a different type of work and stress. But overall good. Just got back from kind of weekend trip down to Seaside and Cannon Beach. So that was kind of nice to get out, get on the road, drive. Definitely tired when I got back though, just because, spent, I think, overall on one of the days coming back, because we were just driving all over the place, like 6.5 hours in the car. So, that can be tiring in itself. But
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's a good weekend. It was a good day today. So kind of ready to to attack the week a little bit. Got more energy this weekend, I feel, or this week, I feel. I think it's
Right.
mostly just because I know it's a short week, just because I don't work tomorrow and I go back on Wednesday.
Right.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I even found time for a nap today, so that's kind of cool.
I agree
Um,
with you. Yeah.
yep.
For our listeners, you know that we always like to do a recording in the beginning of the week and in time for the Sunday. So, this is the first month. This is the first of March, 2021. How time flies. And I agree with Tyler. Today is not our typical Monday vibes. Like, I don't know. I'm off work today too, but usually you still get those Monday vibes. But today was just extra productive. Maybe because, as any Pacific Northwest West person would know, March 2021, it was sunny out there, nice and warm. Like mid 50s, which is socks, shorts, and t-shirt weather for the most part, or with a vest over it. But if you're a Washingtonian, it's sandals and shorts any time of the weather. It's so. But yeah, so it's pretty good day and productive, and we're capping off our night together here, me and Tyler and I, and finish off with a good discussion. So thanks, man. Let's jump right into it. So I know that was a long recap earlier, but Tyler, I'm gonna start with you, man, or if you or whenever you want to jump in.
Mhm.
So the question of the day, part 2 of our question from last week's episode, is basically when it comes to our professional lives and our living situations, what do you see are the generational differences between our generation and our parents and grandparents' generation?
Yeah, no. I think it's you said working. Is that what you said first? Sorry, I just kind of blanked for a second.
Yeah. I mean, you could start on either one, like just basically our professional working lives,
Yeah.
or our like at home lives. Like living situation. However you define like at home living.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll tackle it in a sense of like professional lives and then like travel life and all that stuff. I think one of the glaring differences, and I think it's kind of the root of the question that came in from the viewer or listener rather, was what is like the main difference between, yeah, like you said, grandparents, parents, us, the newest generation, Gen Zers, and all that stuff. Um, it's one of those things. I think the biggest, most glaring difference is that our grandparents or even our parents, like the Boomer generation, the Gen X generation, um, when they were, let's say, when they moved around or if they had a job, they typically got married to that job or to that house or whatever it might be. I mean, ultimately, yes, when you buy a house, you want to live in that house forever, but it's not always the case. You grow as a family, you get older, you either upgrade or you downsize. As far as size goes, just depending on your family situation and all that. Typically, you tend to upgrade when you're younger and you're having kids and everything, and then as you get older, you usually downsize, maybe sell the house, or you just stay in the house that you've been in for 50 years. Um, but I think the biggest one is the job in your career. When you look at the Boomer generation, even our parents, that Gen X generation as well, like you know when they got into a job or a profession, their career, they stayed in it. They what on average might have had 1 to 3 jobs um, in their life once they kind of got into the workforce of hitting 18. Really, I mean, granted, going back to the Boomer generation, they started work at a much younger age just because they were kind of forced to in that regard. But folks from that generation and then even our parents' generation, they typically got married to a position, married to a job. So when they got in at 18 or 19 or 17 or whatever that might be, their starting age was, you see them get into that position and they stay into that position for the majority of their life, or, their entire life, really, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, it's like, I can tell you my dad, when he was working, he really had two jobs, kind of, when he was once he hit 18, he worked kind of like as a electrical technician for, basically companies that, for the Air Force and all that stuff, the military. He would fly out and work on, ships for the shipyard and everything and whatnot. So started his career early there. And then he ended up getting into Boeing and worked for Boeing for essentially the rest of his adult career, until, he basically retired at that point.
Yeah. I would agree with that, man. It's like, you're spot on. Where, to me, from what I see, in my opinion, of our parent generation or grandparents' generation, when they stuck to that job, it's one of those things where they wanted to only either, they got married to it, and they felt that their only way of moving around was only within it. Like, they were scared. I didn't want to say this for everyone, but it seemed like typically they didn't want to look for opportunities outside,
Right.
And so it kind of lead to the thing where, like, maybe our parents' generation was really stuck on the idea of stability, like solid stability, long-term stability, and less risk, And so it really got to the point where, when they got that really one good job they had, they had to what would give them the least calculated risk of failure. And so they stuck with that, they could have had all of these other bunch of investments, but then, for most people of our parents' generation, it was like, the calculated risk had to be very, almost near zero, for them to jump ship to take a huge investment like that. Because, especially from an Asian household,
Mm.
if you took the wrong risk and failed, that was a huge, like, blip in everyone's eyes, and but if you made it work, then it was like, oh, you know that wasn't luck. Like, you were just amazing. Yeah, I wish I could be like you, but only you can be like you, kind of thing.
Right.
But the risk of failing outweighed the award, the reward.
Yeah.
And so they would take a typical, construction type job, or some job that, like, um uh uh the projection of the job lasting, in the future, had a longer timeline, and so you're like, you know what, I could work that job, live the American dream for like 65, until I'm 65, so I could cut that pension check or whatever, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really different.
No, definitely. Obviously, with each generation learns from the last, kind of thing. Like Boomer generation. It was a very different time. Women didn't really work; they were housewives, honestly. And typically the men of the family went to work, and that's just how it was. And they got married to one job. They didn't really jump around jobs. There weren't options back then, as far as like jumping around. It was all within the business.
Right.
You look at our parents, kind of, obviously they learned something from that generation, as far as that goes, because, it was, you, I'd say more times than not, you would see, like, at least in our parents' Gen X generation, like, they would kind of stick with one job until, it was either they couldn't move anymore in that job, or they just got fed up with the job, or, you know, if they got fired or something. But I mean, just theoretically speaking, my parents never really got fired from anything. But it kind of just depends on how it goes. Because thinking back, like even with my mom, she is kind of like a lifetime. She likes retail, and that's where she is. and still is now. But like, anything before like I was born, I don't know what she did. She, as far as work, I know she worked at like Brown Bear and all that stuff. Like, so maybe like 16-year-old jobs, she was able to get. But, in my lifetime, as far as, in my 30 years of life on this earth, um, my mom's only had 3 jobs. She worked at Toys R Us, Staples, and Joann's. So it's like, it's one of those things. I guess Ross, she had a very small stint with Ross, just because the boss, the manager that moved over there was her old manager. They needed help or something, but still, you know what I'm saying? So like, it's one of
Right.
those things. You kind of stick in a position, um, for a while, and then you move on to the millennial generation, like our generation,
Yeah.
like,
What about us?
yeah, I mean, I think, what was it, the average, between what, 18 and 24, at least in our generation, um, we've had what, between like, I think the stat was like between 5 and 15 different jobs between 18 and 24, just because we tend to move around so much, just because we're like, oh, this is kind of boring. I'm not satisfied here. Let's move on to something else. Oh, I don't see myself growing in this position. Let's move on to something else. Um, so it's kind of funny to see like that's kind of our generation is. And if you think about, like, obviously our parents are like, why did you quit that job? Why are you working at, this other job? Why are you doing this? My parents really never questioned me as far as like that goes. Like, if I got a new job, they're like, oh, what happened to the other one? I'm like, oh, it just wasn't working out. Like, just kind of was the end of my time there, and just, kind of wanted to move on.
Yeah.
But even
What do
then,
you,
I haven't really bounced around too much since college. So
yeah. What do you think do you think that's because we're just we're just more comfortable with accepting higher risk, or we're just more stubborn in knowing what we want to get, or at least wanting to get what we want to get. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like what is it with our generation and the newer generation too? The Zoomer generation. I mean, we hear about them, but I mean, I'm not going to talk about them. I don't know too much about their generation,
yeah.
but for our generations, like, what is it about us?
Honestly, I think it was just, I can't say for sure. I mean, I can't speak to the topic like crazy, but it's just, I think there's just like, we got bored. We get bored easily, I feel like. This is coming from a generation that saw the development of computers. It saw the development of cell phones and technology and video games and all of that stuff. So we were constantly in a state where we were learning new things. We were seeing new things. We were never bored because new things were coming out. Um, so, when we got to the position of actually working and everything, it's like, maybe this isn't what I wanted. This is not what I wanted. I'm bored here. This is not like my passion. I'm going to move on, see what I can do somewhere else. Um, something like that. I think what it comes down to is just like, we always kind of strive for more, especially if we don't like what we're doing. And we're just trying to look for the next big thing. I would say a lot of people try to do the quick buck thing, like, oh, let's just hop around to the more paying job, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day too, like, if you look at the people that didn't do that, like, okay, there's not really opportunity for growth here for me, and I'm not like just going to settle. I'm going to go to a different job that maybe respects me a bit more. Whereas, other generations didn't necessarily do that. They didn't really hop to another job. They just were, the risk there was just like one of those things, like our generation, and even like the generation after us, like they came out with YOLO and stuff. So it's like, oh, okay, well, you only live once, so let's go, kind of thing. And that's why I think that our generation was more apt to traveling. We traveled a lot, but I think that's it also plays a part with our parents, because our parents, I feel like, I can't speak for everyone's parents, but I know there's some parents out there that are just like, oh man, if I could relive my 20s, I would travel and do all that, because I didn't really get to, and especially when I had kids, can't travel as much. So then, obviously it's funny, because then you get out there, like our generation, we start traveling and doing all that stuff and going places and whatever. And then your parents are like, why are you traveling so much? You need to save money. I'm like, well, why did you tell me to do that in the first place? So I'm sure that's relatable to a lot of people. You know, your parents are like, oh yeah, make sure you travel when you're young because you don't get to as much when you have kids and have a family. And, you know, have fun and do all that, live freely. But then when you do it, then they're like, oh, you should be smarter with your money. What are you doing? Why are you traveling so much? I'm like, all right, you just kind of contradicted everything you told me when I was younger, but whatever. I'm just going to keep doing my thing. So I think, yeah, our generation was a little bit more apt to be like that wild and free kind of generation as far as moving, you know, across jobs and going to experience new things and just wanting to look for the next big thing, next fun thing, whatever that may be. And again, I can't speak like you said, we can't speak for the generations after us, the Zoomers and Gen Z and all that stuff. But ironically, it's kind of funny how these things work. Just because, like, based off of an article I was reading and whatnot, it's one of those things too. And we've talked about it in previous episodes of how things kind of just happen in cycles, right? So things kind of just repeat themselves at times. One of those things I feel like is the job industry right now too. So you look at this newer Gen Z generation and stuff, and the people that are coming up right now, it's kind of funny because they're between their 18 and 23 range or whatever, or 16 to 23 range or whatever, their amount of, or their number of jobs that they have applied, gotten into and worked and everything mimic those of, like, you know, boomers and Gen X. They kind of get into a position and they start, and they kind of stay there. And it's kind of the same with, funny to talk about too, is marriage as well. You see a lot of people in this younger generation right now that are like 21, 22 getting married young, whereas like our generation, the millennial generation and everything, you know, the majority of us, like, at least in our friend group, I can't speak to the entire generation of things, because obviously the people did get married young and stuff, but like even like our friend group and like expanding to my other friend groups and everything, like the people that got married, they didn't get married until 28, 29, 30. So it's kind of one of those things, like, it's, you know, you go back and you look at it, it's like, I think boomers, you know, their average marriage when they got married was between, you know, 18 and 21. Gen Xers was kind of between, you know, 19 and 24. And our generation, I think this weird stat was like a little bit older. Like we always say, the new 20 is 30 kind of thing, or 30 is the new 20. So that's really when you begin your lives. And that's when a lot of the, you know, or at least our friend group and some of the people I know in our generation have been getting married, you know, around that time. And then you see these kids coming out of high school now. I say kids, I feel old now, but you see these kids coming out at 18, 19, and they're getting married right out of high school. And, you know, they have no like world experience or like real career experience, and they're learning to grow together and all that stuff. Like, you know, it's kind of funny how that works with cycles, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like they always say, history repeats itself, right?
Yeah.
I just want to bring up a good point about the technological advancement, you know, is a huge thing. Because, me being the oldest, in my being the oldest son of my parents, you know, I kind of took after them, you know, where I was grilled by them a lot to kind of like take up after, you know, their expectations. And so, you know, going through college and whatnot, I always had this one track mind that I needed to get to like a particular type of study, a particular type of job. Right. And then it was like when I found my way a little bit on my own, I realized a couple things happened. The work ethic, the expectations they hammered in me, develop a type of work ethic where I saw like a type of way that I had to play the game, right? But then our generation morphed me into where I'm like, okay, how do I make their expectations or their way of working much smarter? That's why I think that's where our generation developed the term "work smarter, not harder," right? Um, so I realized from the technological advancement that we have, that with quite literally the internet at our fingertips with our phones and whatnot, we could research hundreds, millions, of of data, information of anything we want to learn right there. Now, easier said than done because the internet's saturated with a lot of mess of information. But if you could piece together the right amount of information, you realize you could pretty much learn anything, short of a license type of degree, right? But you can pretty much learn whatever you want. So, like you said before, it's like we originally thought we had one track mind of one passion we want to pursue, but then maybe we don't get bored. Maybe it's not that we get bored, but that is one possibility too. But it's more of maybe we found additional information that no one ever told us, but we found on our own from the internet and was like, you know what? Maybe that's my actual passion. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. One, if you don't know your passion, you can finally discover it really quickly from from just searching the internet. Or two, maybe the negative of our generation is, and why we move around so much, is maybe because it's not that we're bored or we're trying to find different passions. It's that we can't choose one passion because we have so much information bombarding us that we're like, you know what? I don't really know what I want, and sometimes that's could be a detracting thing. And so I'd like to twist it a little bit, play the little devil's advocate, where it's like, it seemed like we were trying to argue for, obviously we're millennials. And so we're trying to argue for why we're doing the things we're doing in a beneficial light. But then we got to think on the other way from like our previous generation looking at us. And obviously they can agree that we have a much more technological advancement than they do in terms of the internet. But, maybe from their perspective, they knew exactly what they wanted. And yes, they were a little stubborn in a sense where they stayed married to it and stuck to it. Where we don't know what we want because we keep getting bombarded with so many information. I mean, like, hey, think about it this way. From my personal experience, we had a bunch of friends. We did the music thing together, just bought a mic, someone who knew how to make beats, knew how to knew how to produce. We were like, you know what? Let's be musicians. Halfway through it, I'm like, you know what? Got some new information. Maybe I don't want to be an artist. Maybe I just want to be someone who produces. Turns out, I don't really care for producing. Now I want to be just a lyricist. Maybe I just want to be someone who writes for someone. Turns out I don't want to be, I don't want to even be involved with music. I just want to write a book. It's like we continue to not know what we want, or continue to fall down this rabbit hole, right? Of like being bombarded of like what we really want to know. But from my experience overall, if you can connect what your parents expected of you from the old generation and connect it with the new generation, you will find what you want. For me, I started appreciating finance and money and economy and stuff like that. Do I want to be an economist? No. But do I want to be an investor and stuff like that? That's what I grew over time to learn. And I'm not where I want to be. I'm not perfect. I'm not know-it-all. But over time, I realized when I bridged the gap between the old generation and our generation, I realized what made me, right? Because quite literally, your parents made you, literally. But at the same time, how they molded you was one way, and then but it was only half, and then you had to basically figure out your other half, and then it really makes you who you are. And I think that is the beauty of our cross-generational differences, is for me, I feel like you have to accept how your parents molded you and then how you finish that mold up to make it completely who you are, right? So I think that is what it is, in my opinion, the benefit of all, There's negatives to both generations, but there's positives. to both, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I just think that's kind of, it's positive and negatives. I think pros and cons, or however you want to look at it. I mean, that's kind of the biggest difference. Like you said, it's just, they knew what they wanted, honestly. And then, when they get to a certain age and they get to have kids, and they're just like, I mean, at least my parents told me, it's like, explore what you want. Obviously, most Asian households, they just expect you to become doctors. But that's because, that's the American dream to them. Become doctors and make all the money, because that's what it is. Those are the most high paying jobs back in the day. Now you look at it and you see, tech. Tech is like the biggest thing now. If my kid, if I have a kid and I'm like, okay, do I force them to say like, hey, be a doctor, or hey, go to school to become like an electronic technician of technology, kind of thing. Just because, like, even if you look at it, like, even like Washington State, we just what was it, last summer? Well, maybe not last summer. It was actually almost 6 months ago now. Like, they upped the starting salary for anyone working um in like the cyber division, any sort of technology, any jobs that had to do with that. So like your technician or your IT. Yeah, basically IT. That's what, I don't know why I didn't say that anyways. They basically raised like the beginning salary of IT professionals to $98,000 a year. Didn't matter what you were in. Businesses were like, you're like, oh no, you have to pay at least 98,000 for these people. And I'm like,
Right.
can you imagine like some of those companies that were only paying these guys like $60,000, and now they're being told like, no, you're actually required to pay them $40,000 more dollars.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, that's cool. But it's like, oh man. So it's like, it's one of those things. It's just, as time goes on, like different things pop up too. Medical profession, obviously much needed, and was a big thing that, like, everyone, like, at least in our generation, like, hey, grow up and become a doctor or a dentist or any of those things in the medical field, because those are going to be your biggest payouts. Which, yes, in the long term, maybe that is the case. They don't tell you about how much money you have to pay for the schooling of that, but if you're able to do that and you're able to pay it off and all that stuff, great. You will be set in that regard. Lots of stats on those, and the depression rate in going into the medical field too. So yeah, it's one of those things. That's a different topic altogether. I digress.
Yeah.
I digress. But yeah, but nowadays it's like everything, like, obviously talking about the technology standpoint and like just the advancement of all of that. Like, yeah, like these IT professionals, they make, starting $98,000 now. And it's like, that's crazy. Why wouldn't I tell my son to go, or my daughter, or, my kid, to just go into, go into IT? Like,
Right.
like, hey, you got the brains, you can do this. Do it.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, it's one of those things. It's a big. I mean, would you agree though that really kind of find the balance in our lives, it kind of, the big question begs, like, what is the general differences? We kind of spelt that out a little bit in our opinion. But do you feel like the most consistent thing in any lifetime is the ability to figure out who you are, or what you want to be? I feel like that's the most consistent thing in every generation, but it's how do you find that is the question, because with all these different advancement, it shifts, how we want to be. Because I think if we could wrap it up here, I think if we could end it on one, I would say spiritual note, maybe, or maybe kind of like a thought, a food for thought, right? I would say our parents were hard on us. Most parents, especially ours, I would say, was hard on us by, giving us these expectations to be doctors, you said, or, things that paid a lot of money, engineers, lawyers.
Right.
was because they felt like this was how they found themselves through this type of work, through this type of, and I don't mean like work, like literal profession. I meant like to get to that type of career, you know, how you worked in between makes you find who you are, right? That's why they probably stayed married to one job, you know. And you know, we're not talking about marriage to your significant other. That's for another topic. When we're using marriage today in our conversation in this episode, we're talking about being married to like um, uh, a non-human thing, right? And so we're talking about jobs. It's so, you know, we're not going to get into you know, sticking to one marriage. That's a wholly different conversation. But anyways, marriage to like one job, like sticking to one thing, is because they knew that in their time they worked their ass off to get to that stability, right? And so between all that, they found who they were, that they were someone to willing to grind it out to get to that stability that will, you know, pay itself for themselves and their family, right? And so that's why I feel like they instilled it in us, because it's like they're like, you know, the internet, the information age, the internet age is a little scary. You know, kids are in the front of the screen a lot more. Heck, you know, of the new generation, I see my nephews and nieces like quite literally growing up knowing how to use an iPad before they even know how to talk or walk, right? And so it's like, overall, it's like, all right, our parents are scared and they're hoping and they're scared that we're gonna detract from the path of how to find ourselves, right? And so I think overall they push us because they want us to be the best version of ourselves as we can be. And so this is just their way of being a hard ass by pushing us to be like, hey, do the grind so you can figure out who you are. And the only grind they know is, you know, be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, etc., right? Because that's the only grind they know. Go to school. But our generation knows a little bit better. Okay, not better, but we know a little differently. Now we know that we don't have to go to school to be a millionaire or to make it big. You know, we could create our own online business just from the comfort of our home. We can find other ways to make a lot of money and work hard ourselves, right? But it's just, to them, it seems backwards, or it seems like it's making shortcuts. You know, to them, it looks like we are banking on, you said it earlier, you know, the quick buck scheme, you know, the quick money schemes. That's what it looks like to them. Like, you know, it doesn't look like hard work to them. I think in an analogy, it's the same way that, you know, musicians and DJs argue of what is harder to play in music. I'm not a musician, so you know, I can't. I love music, but I can't really say one or the other. I enjoy acoustics as much as I enjoy electronic. You know, but I would say that from the same people who produce music with instruments, I feel like pushing buttons and whatnot is still an instrument. You know, but you know, that's the analogy I'm putting in from the old generation to the new generation. When they see us making or trying to work hard to create an online business, they're like, oh, you're just throwing things online and, you know, if they build it, they'll come. That's easy. It's not teaching you hard work. But I argue that that's also hard work. This is just our generation of hard work, right? So overall, I feel like generational differences is just a different type of technology advancement we have. But overall, the goal is the same. We all just want each other to be successful and be the best we can be.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So leave it up at that. Again, you know, it's our opinion. You know, this is not rooted in facts. So we're going to wrap it up tonight. We thank y'all for listening as always. Thank you for our listener who provided us this question that is really heated in a good way, because it makes us, you know, this is part 2 of it, and we're about to make a part 3 on marriage and stuff like that. Marriage to another person this time instead of marriage to a job. But we thank y'all for listening. I mean, think about what we just talked about. Think about what how we just capped it off in the end. That food for thought. Take this question, run it by yourself, run it by with your friends and your family, and see what you guys come up with. Do you agree with us, or what is your own responses? Drop us an email, drop us a comment of what you think, or some questions you have for us to elaborate on, and we'll try to expand on it as much as we can. But thank you again. This is our stories, your legacy, and we love doing this, and we're going to keep doing it. And we appreciate y'all listening. So time to wrap it up for tonight. We'll see y'all next week.
Later.